Hey everybody, Edo here, and I am super duper excited today because we have Jessica Walker on the line. Say hello, Jessica.
Hello.
And so for those who don't know, Jessica um, is the sales and operation manager for Pencil First Games. And she's awesome. She's been working with us for over a year now, coming maybe a year and a half. And if you're interacting with Pencil First Games on social media, on our site, if you're just getting stuff from us, you probably have seen Jessica or her name. But actually, that's not what we're going to talk about at all. That's just FYI. But what we're going to talk about is actually you are extremely active in the solo gaming scene. Yeah,
Yes.
you have the Gameword bound website and your solo reviews and playthroughs. You're in the BGG site and all sorts of things. In fact, somewhat of the basis for us working together was along with being interested in doing the type of job we were looking for at the time in sales. You mentioned casually that you're like, and by the way, I've played Herbaceous solo like 1,000 times, like literally, and they're all tracked. Every
That's
score I've
normal,
ever,
right?
here's a graph of every point score I've ever. And so it was super interesting, and you've been great with Pencil First Games. But what I thought would be cool would be actually to talk about the solo space,
Mhm.
how you sort of got into solo play, and then got into content creation, and then the different places solo gamers are gathering, and the types of play, and just I'm not as, even though Pencil First Games has done a lot in the scene in the space with solo play, I'm not like deep in it myself, so I'm super curious. And then actually, you are going to do some solo top 10 lists on the
Yes.
channel in the next week or so whenever it comes out, and I'm excited about that too. You sent me the
Yes.
list like, how about these games? And I was like, I haven't played any of these
What are
games.
these?
um, but okay, so in terms of just starting from the beginning, like
Mhm.
sort of what was your introduction, or how did you step into the world of board gaming, and then like what was the game that got you into solo play? Like what was that
Yeah.
journey like?
It is a very weird journey, I will say.
Those are the
It's
best
not, I don't
kind.
think it's a typical one, but probably early 2000s I started getting into like Carcassonne and Catan with mostly my brother. We, you know, brought the parents in a little bit.
Sure.
So we did some multiplayer games there, just exploring a bunch of stuff, did a bunch of like Red Raven games. We bought everything there, had fun with that for, I don't know, like 5, 10 years. And then we moved away.
5, 10 years later. Okay, so
Yeah,
so
that's as long as the hobby lasts. No. But we both moved away and we didn't really have as much time to see each other. And by the way, by moving away, we were basically in the same town, but you know
yeah,
how it
I
is.
mean, yeah,
Busy
it's
lives.
totally different. My brother lives in Rhode Island. I live in California, but you two same town, different houses. It's totally, you couldn't see each other ever. Okay, but so okay,
So
so
yeah,
you're
so
apart.
yep, and I didn't have anybody to play with. I didn't know of any game groups in my area. It didn't seem like there were any.
And this is
So
still Rochester.
this is good old Rochester.
Yeah.
I mean, it's actually, now that I know it, it does have some great gaming scenes. But
Home of
back
a
then,
great
I was
game
like,
store.
I live at my board game store now. So,
All right. And okay, so you're like, I don't have anyone to play with.
yep. So I said, I have like, at that point, it was probably like 20 games. And I'm like, what am I doing with these? They're sitting in a closet. I'm either going to get rid of them basically or figure out a way to play these. So I think at that point, I just went online and I was like, what about this thing I vaguely heard about solo gaming? Like, are these even solo friendly? Can I play this by myself? And a lot of them, it looked like it was a no, because on the box they always say, 2 to 4, 2 to 5 players. They said there's no way I can do this. But then digging into that, I finally found Board Game Geek. Took me a
Oh,
little
so
while, but I
you
found
found
it.
Board Game Geek in the pursuit of solo gaming.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. I think I was just looking and being like, can I figure out a way to play these solo?
You were
And that kind
bored.
of led down. I'm like, my path is so,
No, no,
so
no, this
out
is
there.
great. But I mean, you were really like, how can I play these games? I can't. And so you get the BGG and you're like, oh, go on.
Yep. And I'm like, wait, there's actually like fan made variants where I can play this game that's not designed to be soloable and I can play this by myself. What? So there were games that I knew and that I liked. And then I could actually play those so they could get to the table again. Nobody was around. And I think my very first solo experience outside of like, card games and stuff was Alhambra. We recall the good old days of
Alhambra.
Alhambra. Alhambra, yes. We had the
Alhambra? Is that how you pronounce it?
I
Great game,
I
by the
may
way.
be pronouncing it wrong. It's so
It's been a while. Yeah.
it is. We had the big game box, so I had just this huge box sitting around, and there was actually I found a solo mode where you could actually play the different modules, and there was a dummy player
Oh, this is
still, and
after.
I
This
said,
wasn't the
oh
classic edition. This was after they added like 7. This was like the early day.
yes,
Let's add a bunch of expansions.
yes, this was like here's 20 different modules you can play with, and
Sure,
I
sure,
was like,
sure.
whoa, I can start exploring this and doing this, and that was the introduction to actually playing solo. And in that process too, I found the One Player Guild on Board Game Geek and the lovely, lovely Geek List every month of solitaire games on your table, which is basically that's my place.
So what?
That's
So
where I
let's.
hang out.
So I want to. Okay. So let's break this into a few different pieces. So start. Let's start about that place to place. So let's say somebody's watching who is into the solo games, um, and just this idea is yes, you can buy games that are solo, but there is a pretty robust community out there that takes it upon themselves to create solo modes or variants or ways to play with popular games, less popular games, whatever's the
Mm-hmm.
fancy of the person who. These are all usually free, right? Printed
Yep.
plays, directions.
Yep.
So no one's,
A
to my
page.
knowledge, making a lot of money on any of this. But so they create these variant play rules, and you just have the game, and you take the rules. Maybe you have to print a couple cards or some little
Mm-hmm.
components or get a die or whatever. Um, but then you're able to get all this life out of this existing game, um, and totally independent from the publisher, right? Like this is just fan made stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. You're aware of this, and
Yeah.
depending on when this video lands, we have a great game, Legendary Creatures by Christopher Ham, that didn't was sort of earlier and didn't have a solo mode, and over the last year, fan wanted to make one, made one. Chris played it. So this is sort of a different take because we really like solo, but played it. We were really happy with it, and we're releasing like a arted graphic, like a PDF, like a really nice version of that rule set from that person, and we paid him for it, and we're excited to have this slightly nicer, but it's still just a print and play. But so people are generating all this content. Now, can you talk a little bit more specifically of those things on BGG, like the art, the geek list, and the
Yep.
say that again? And we'll if you send
Yes.
them to me, I can put them in the description as
Oh
well.
yeah, definitely. Yes. So the main one is the One Player Guild on BGG. That one's pretty easy to find. It's the biggest guild on BGG. I think it's like at 16 or 17,000
So
members.
let
So
me ask a really naive, totally like take my card away question here. What's a guild on BGG? Like what?
it's it it is a page. It's a group, and it has like a forum section that people
So
can
it's
kind
a
of chat
group
on.
page you can
Yep.
join with its own forums. Got it.
Yeah. And then there's links to all other like helpful resources, and the big one is that geek list every month.
I see. Okay, so this is a group page. Let me just it's like a Facebook group page, but it's on BGG. All
Yep.
people can have it, and all of the topics are related to it, including so everyone's asking, saying, "Hey, I
Yep.
just made this game. Here's it's just a full form." BG. This is the old school BGG part where it's just
Oh yeah.
list view, and but you can go and I assume, and then so when they put the list out monthly,
Yep.
weekly,
It's a
which is it?
monthly list.
Monthly list. Does that include the fan made stuff, or is it only releases?
So the it's actually a community built sort of list. Anybody can post to it, and we have everybody just posts an entry to it, basically
Oh,
saying,
it's that kind of
"Hey, I
thing. Okay,
played this game, and here's all this." But that's also where you find out about fan made variants or what people are working on. They might say, "Hey, here's whatever this game is. It's 10 years old, but I created a solo variant. And here's how I played it. Here's how it works. If you want to try it out, here's the link to do that." So there's
got it.
all
So
types of stuff on
so
there.
when we do this legendary creatures things, you're gonna like drop in and post on that list like, hey, here's
I would be like,
okay.
yes.
Hey, I don't know anything about this.
It's
Okay,
mostly about like what you're playing, not necessarily like new stuff, but that kind of goes into, they go
and,
hand in hand.
and would you say this is more like, does this also include like rankings and reviews and people like complaining about solo? Like, is it full community, or is it really this is like just creators who create the versions, put them up, and get feedback on their versions? And
It's everybody.
yeah,
Anybody can do this. It's a community driven effort. Like we have different hosts every month, so sometimes there's a theme, and you can participate and play specific games or do answer questions. But it kind of works that it's a lot of mini reviews of games. You kind of get an idea of like, all right, what does this person really post about a lot? You get to know people in the community. And I think that's one side of solo gaming that isn't always apparent. There's a huge community for it, and
and
people come together to talk about it.
and remind me on BGG, your little creature character, your handle is what on BGG?
My BGG username is Albia,
Albia.
Albia, and it
Yeah,
actually stems from a 90s game that like 5 people know about called Creatures with Norns and Grendels and artificial life, etc.
got it, got it. Oh, do you mean the video game creatures or the board game?
Yes,
Oh, I know that
video
game.
game.
Oh, okay. I
Oh
mean,
my Ed,
not
come on, how did I not know this?
of course. There was, I mean, before the mobile, I probably could tell you about every single video game released. But not actually would not have remembered the names of the space in the world. So you have me there. Okay. So when did you hit this space? This you were like you started. This is like 2010. You hit this.
Actually, no, I probably 2017, I think, is
Oh,
when I
okay.
actually really got into participating and figuring out
So
what solo
so
games
as
were.
of 2017, the solo scene is like beginning its explosion. I would say like there's the
Yes.
like super explosion of the pandemic, right? Which
Yep.
was but like there was like a really like I don't know if it was the combination of Kickstarter. I mean, actually, let me just ask you because you know more about it. Like, how would you from the point in which you came in, where you're going to have the most information, unless you've done like some historic research on this, like
I have not.
what do you think are the big drivers behind the growth of solo over the years?
I think it is just that recognition that there are a lot of people playing solo for tons of different reasons. It's not always just because I can't find a game group. It might be I just want to have a nice challenge with this game. And I want to have something that I love this game and I want to spend more time with it, but I don't have people to play with maybe. Or I only have an hour today. I can't, I obviously can't go meet up with somebody. What can I do to have fun with this? And it's gone from, I think, originally a lot of solo modes where you're the beat your own score sort of, you know, situation, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But I think that we've seen a lot more with getting, I see you laughing here.
I'll finish it. I'll speak when you finish what you're saying.
But I think we've also seen more of getting an actual solo opponent or an automa or something that simulates another player. So we still have those beat your own scores games, and I think those are still great. But I think there's a more diverse group there, and I think it's bringing more people into the hobby. And I think that publishers and designers are kind of seeing that there's a lot of potential with adding a solo. There's a bigger audience that will be more interested, etc.
Yeah,
And
well,
now
so
here goes Ed.
well, no, I'm chuckling slash smiling because obvious to you and me, but not necessarily anyone else who's watching, is many of the lighter pencil first games have that kind of beat the score mode, and actually, from my like in some ways in the solo community, from my outside people impacting me way, not necessarily true to the majority or anything like that, but the vocal folks, um, equate that kind of score based solo often to like roll and move. Like they talk about it in the same way you might talk about Monopoly. And from my perspective, I actually I think in many ways I often prefer it. I really don't like solo games where you're like almost exclusively just playing another hand. Like there's Automa, which is okay if it's done well and it skips a lot of steps, but the
Mm-hmm.
ones where you're like, oh yeah, you're playing the two-player version, you're just like swapping between your hand and it. Like to me, it's like uh, it's not I'm not looking for player management. It's about
Yep.
experiencing the game, right? And so I think there's lots of different delightful ways to do that. Some
Yep.
have been more successful than others, but anyway. But so it often comes up, Herbaceous is a good example where, you know, that's the type of solo that is intended. It wasn't like it was a choice. It wasn't like we
Yes.
couldn't have done it the other way. We wanted to do it this way. Um, but okay, so you hit this community. It's obviously growing. So at
Yes.
what point are you like, this guild page isn't good enough for me? This geek list can't hold my interest. When did you start your Gameword Bound website?
So I had been basically on that geek list. I always did like this really, I do detailed reports. Like I have pictures, I have explanations, I have ratings, all this other stuff. And I said, it's getting harder and harder for me to even find my own stuff. Like I have to go page through all this stuff. It's hard to find. I need this in my own spot. And also where I can kind of control the design because I like bigger text, and BGG does not always have the bigger text available. So that was basically just moving that over. Except right now, I still have the blog, but I post part of that on the geek list every time. So there's
Yeah,
I'm all over.
well, yeah, well, certainly, one of the things that if you're not familiar with BGG on the sort of posting your review or your article, they have a policy that you can't just link to it. You have to
Yep.
basically embed the entire content or a lot of it and then link across
Yep.
effectively like, you know, BGG shouldn't be a redirect. It should be the place where you
Right.
read the content type of
Yep.
vibe. Um, but and to compliment you, I remember going to. I mean, that site always contributed to um, your getting involved with Pence First Games because I
Whoa.
mean, for those who, it's really worth checking out. It's more than just simply review or playthrough notes. You really do have a lot of analytics and data in there. Depends on the game, obviously, but for
Yep.
play count, there's well really nice widgets within your site and just a lot of really good information about your playthrough. More than you like. It's atypical for most reviews and content today. Like most reviews and content today don't have that level of depth and detail, and you manage to have that while posting pretty often.
I know. I
You're
don't know
playing.
how I do it.
So okay, and so you start that page and like and have people become familiar with it? Like do you still it was mostly people were seeing it on BGG? Do you have any sense of how the audience splits between the two of them?
It's still mostly from BGG, and that's kind of what I intended it to be. I never intended it to be like take off and everybody sees this. It's still sort of like its own little thing. And I've done blogging for a while, and I think the big thing there is you always want to write for yourself is like an important piece of that. If you start writing what everybody else is writing about, you don't have fun. So that piece for me is fun, like doing all those analytics and everything, like you said, having those in there. I One of my weird things I do, I actually measure the table space for the solo area, so there those measurements are in there to like. But again, it's useful, I think,
Well,
both
I
to me and
for
other
your
people.
yeah, I mean it's very specific to the audience, I think. Well, actually, I think knowing the footprint of a game, um, I, I actually there's another video that I'm going to post where I mention it, but like I had it's up in my head right now, but Flamecraft, which isn't released yet, has a really long rollout map, and it was just
Mhm.
like this is like a lot of space, guys. Like, um, and I'm certainly Sunset Over Water is an example of a game that has like a big like this is a lot of table for a small
Yep.
time, and I think it's a good consideration. So okay, so we've talked about the sort of the growth of the community. How receptive has the community been to the newfound players and attention? Like, so over the pandemic, everyone's stuck at home. There's a lot more people playing, and I do think it gets missed. And I see somebody there was like one of those like 5,000 comment, you know, board game group hate threads. But I think there's a gap around people not understanding that people just enjoy the play.
Mhm.
It's like can you understand people like to read a book? Like, is
Yep.
that confusing to you? Like
And
where's the gap between that and playing? I've always struggled with people who like to go to the movie theater by themselves because I've always
mhm.
went with groups. But lots of people enjoy different things and
Yep.
can have fun with products, especially as there more and more games are being made with solo modes that are different and
Yep.
intended, right? But and just solo only games.
Hmm.
So has the community been, because there's a much bigger spotlight on the
Yeah.
community, I think, than
Yep.
there was historically. How has that changed things, if at all, or you
I
know?
mean, where what I'm talking about with the one player guild and solitaire games on your table, or scoit as it's known, um, we're always excited for people that jump in, because again, I think it's that discovery process. People who just get into the hobby don't necessarily realize how many choices there are. They might just have one game and they think it's awesome. And the whole idea there is, even if somebody comes in, and I know that there's always a stigma around Monopoly, for instance. You know, if somebody loves Monopoly, get that person into the hobby. Say, yes, that's great, but here's some other things. Don't come down on those games.
I agree. By the
There's
way, I agree. And I enjoy Monopoly. I think that it is unwarranted hate. But you know, it's like, when my kids have like, have access to a lot of board games, and they're like, let's play Uno. But then you're like, oh, they just put it down, they start playing it. Like there's certain things you can appreciate when you're like, in the environment with people who play these types of games.
yes.
Um, so you have this huge influx um, of folks. You have the base you had in place. How has, one of the things, one of the trends I feel like, but you can correct me, is the emergence of more and more solo only products.
Yes.
Um, Describe what's going on there, and how that's been changing things, or interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of those. There's also not necessarily having a solo only mode, but even just having that solo mode included, it's not getting tacked on anymore. I think originally, maybe not originally, but back in the day, a lot of solo modes were just there. Like, oh yeah, if you really want to play this solo, you can. Here's how you do it, but there was no real thought into how is this going to be an experience? How is this going to be fun for somebody? And I think we're seeing that sort of turn now to saying, wait a second, there is this big solo community. They want to have an experience. This isn't just about numbers all the time. And that's what it was, I think, before, was a lot of focus was on just get this score. Here's your score, you're done. Yeah, you may have had like a nice combination of cards or whatever along the way, but how do you actually make this an experience? I think themes are getting, thematically, I think we're seeing a lot of different themes. It's not all just whatever it was, the farming. There was a time when it was just farming, and that was your solo. Now there's all different types of themes. There's all mechanics that are being, roped into solo that you might not have found before. Like on one of my lists, there's going to be a game that actually includes hidden movement and deduction in solo for a
Well,
solo only game. So
you were telling me. I mean, so there's a lot of interesting, and my headphones might die, and I'll have to just go to normal, a different volume. But because I got the one of them was like doo, 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 doo,
oh
doo.
no.
But I mean, there are some really interesting considerations as a publisher that have come through that you have to deal with in a lot of different ways. I mean, I thought, like, so a couple examples, like again, as part of Pencil First Game stuff, you played the Siblings Trouble for the first time, and you actually did a post about solo playing two characters through the Siblings Trouble, and I was like, I didn't think somebody could do that. I'd be like, doing narrative and story art role
Mhm.
playing different character roles through a guided game is an interesting concept that I hadn't really wrapped my head around previously. And then you're like, well, like, is that like fringe, or is that enough that you could like make it and put a one player mode? Like, but is that, that seems pretty unstructured. So that's an interesting consideration. But the other thing, which I know other publishers deal with, which is super interesting to me, is, so okay, cool, solo mode, great. Do it in the, designers are coming to the table with solo modes as well. Like, it's everyone, give or take, sees it as a thing, you know, that's more and more expected, but also a value add to the product.
Mhm.
But the interesting thing is, I've come to appreciate that solo players tend to be the first players who play your game. So in the last few years of releases, the feedback you get first is from the people who can just, they get the game, they open it up. And many of these folks might play it with other people, but actually bought it because of the solo or want to do that first. And so you get this interesting feedback um, from 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 that base in advance of the other players. And it's weird because, I mean, not for all publishers, but certainly I tend to make a multiplayer game first or consider things as multiplayer. So it's like you're getting feedback from the solo before you have anyone who's giving you feedback on the multiplayer. I actually had a long conversation with Keith Mateka, who does a lot of our solo modes. Um, I was watching Bonzinator, right?
Yep.
On Twitch, live stream playing um, solo Foliferous.
Mm-hmm.
And which is like and doing it in a way where she was learning on camera. So that's always like, oh god, but it was an entertaining evening. But what was super interesting to me is and this is something like I'm thinking about go forward, and I don't know how to do it. But generally speaking, when you do solo rules, not always, but you usually teach the multiplayer game, and then you have the section for solo. And we've actually gone through and made bigger sections, but most of them have an inherent expectation you understand the game. So it'll be like, play the game normally, but introduce this, or when you do this, instead do this, or use this deck of cards. But it's almost, and when I've played other solo modes, not in a solo only game, obviously, but it's almost always not. I want to, you could correct me, but my experience with it is majority of the time there's the like, oh, we assume you've read the multiplayer one, or at least have played it. Watching her struggle, not because it's a hard game, but she hadn't read the rules. She literally started on the multiplayer or single player rule section.
Yep.
And so she was like, did a setup as in a 2-player game. So then she had to like flip back to page 3, and then she's like reading it and flipping back and watching that player experience for me, because my job often entails creating great player experiences. I was like, that sucks. Who wants to go in and have to keep referencing backwards and editing? And so I was talking to Keith. I was like, it really begs to be like, no, you should just have a solo that teaches solo entirely.
Yes.
But then you're like, so you're doubling the manual, and you have all this redundant information. And there's like a whole nother thing, which is in rule books, redundant, and as you've now learned, redundant information is awful because it means if you have one word difference, it creates confusion. So I would like, but there's this real tension. I mean, watching her. So is that an experience as a solo player? Is it like, yes, Ed, reading rules and referencing is a pain in the butt, or is it?
It's a big thing. It's a big thing in the solo community. You don't always hear about it because it's not as, I don't think it's as hot of a topic all the time, but whenever there is a new game and someone has to, I do that too. I always assume I got to scroll to the back, or not scroll, I'm using it now. I got to go to the back of the rule book, look for the solo mode. Okay, what does this tell me to do? All right, this looks like I'm going to have to start at the multiplayer rules, read all those, then go back to the solo rules and be like, okay, what's different? And try to learn that without having played the game yet it's hard. And it's not always the best first experience. And when you first play a solo game, that's the one thing you don't have. When you're a solo player, you don't have somebody there to say, wait a second, I don't think you're playing that rule correctly. You're doing that wrong. So that getting those rules right from the beginning is important. And I have done this where I've started a new game. I'm like, I got this. I think I got the rules. I play through it. And then I find out, I just did it wrong. I made it too hard. I made it too easy because I didn't understand this one rule due to the whole experience of having to almost read 2 different rule sets, but in my mind, combine them. So it is tricky, but I do get the consideration of having basically 2 rule books.
Can you think, have you seen so in a game where it isn't exclusively solo, can you think of one that did actually had a full-fledged solo, you don't need to read the other rule sheet?
I would have to check. There's definitely good ones out there. I can't think off the top of my head because I know the bad examples. There's the ones that don't do it right. The ones that do it right are few and far between, though. That's why it's kind of hard to remember them, because it doesn't seem to be a thing that gets done. When it is, we get excited.
I know it. Yeah. I mean, it really, that was the first time it really genuinely occurred to me.
Mhm.
Delicious, which is upcoming, it doesn't do it that way, and I'm not going back and undoing it. And
Yep.
actually, I did that solo mode, but I'm still like that. I'd have to redo the whole. I don't know what even
Yeah.
what I would do, but
There's a lot there. Yeah.
yeah, it is something though that I'm going to think about. Um, from All Peak, we have a solo only experience that teaches you how to play, and it works perfectly because there's no other. That's it.
Yep.
Um, um, so anyway, uh, okay. So you're gonna be doing these other videos, which I'm super excited about. So not looking to spoil them, but curious, in the last few months, what is a really stellar example of a solo experience that you've played where like you really thought it was well put together and delivered the fun and the fantasy of the game, um, but solo?
For we talking new games because I have so many unplayed there.
Oh, no, no, I mean, no, I'm just saying, I'm just like, can you name a couple really good examples
Hmm.
um, of where you think they did a really good job on the solo experience?
Yep. My number one game, which is not really that much of a surprise. Everyone knows I love this one. There's a game called Obsession, which is about managing a British family back in the day. It's like Downton Abbey type,
Oh, I
Jane
remember this
Austen
game,
style stuff.
the box at least.
That one, I love the solo experience. You have a bunch of different possible solo opponents that have various degrees of difficulty, and planning to play against them is just, it's fun, it's an entertaining experience. I always come off with a horrible accent, no offense intended. It's just that my horrible British accent comes out as I narrate this game for myself.
I was about to be like, you mean when you're talking to yourself?
Exactly.
That it's fantastic to have fun. And one other maybe more universally themed.
Oh, let me think, hold on. A lot of them do them differently, and I'm trying to think what is, I mean, another kind of universal theme one, Role Player, which Keith Mateka, but that one is a great solo experience. And I think what both of those, Obsession and Role Player, kind of have together is that the solo game is not so different from multiplayer, which again goes into learning the game. I think with both of those I had great experiences learning it because it was understandable. That got me to keep playing, and the focus on those becomes having fun versus did I get this rule right.
Right, right, for sure, for sure. Awesome. Well, listen, Jessica, it has been an absolute pleasure. I mean, obviously, I mean, you and I speak very
All the time.
regularly, but it was really cool to learn more about the space and play behavior. So I think again, definitely going to list some of these references in the page. Hopefully, people can dive in. And is there so okay, again, I'm interested in is there like a welcome page on the BGG Guild, or is there like a starting point?
This has been talked about several times. I think there is one thread that is supposed to be you introduce yourself. I can give you the link for that. It is very hidden, but it's basically just jump in, start posting about what you're playing, and you'll see people just, we just love welcoming people into the community. And I think that's for me with solo. I think I started playing solo to kind of get more life out of the games I had, but I stuck around because the community is great. It's almost like the one player guild, our slogan there is together we game alone, which is very true. We're all playing alone, but I think we share a lot of those experiences with the whole community. So even though we're not playing together, we kind of are.
Awesome, awesome. That's exciting. So thanks so much for being on, and we will have that link to that specific hidden thread, and hopefully some more people check things out. And I think
Yeah.
again, it is a growing um, category, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's super awesome to see all the new stuff, and I get to play some of it here and there, but probably could play some more. So I'm looking
And
forward to your other videos to find some good
I will
ones.
give you the list too to the People's Choice Top 200 solo of this year, which
Sure.
was awesome.
I love it. Well, I mean, I, per usual, hey, just send me a bunch of links and I'll just
And
talk
they're going to be
about
down
them.
there. Yep.
I think actually you could even edit it yourself too, because you have access. But anyway, awesome. Thanks everyone for watching, and thanks Jessica for being on.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hey everybody, Edo here, and thanks for watching Gaming with Edo. Reviews over here on this playlist, League and Insider videos over here on this one. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff. But most importantly, play some great games. Thanks.